Optical switches are one of those things that no one really asked for, but companies are still trying to push them as the next big thing for gaming. I'm obviously a pro and don't need them, so I guess I must have received someone else's package by mistake. Today, we're going to see if it's possible to turn a regular switch into an optical one. Traditional mechanical switches have a leaf with two metal prongs sticking out the bottom of the housing that connected to the keyboard. On optical switches, the prongs are replaced with an opening in the center where the pole resides. Once the pole crosses a certain point, it interrupts a beam of light and triggers a key press. Currently, with hot swappable mechanical keyboards, there are three main types of sockets. I like to categorize them as 5-pin, 3-pin, and Otemu 3-pin. 5 pins have one slot for the pole, 2 for the leaves, and 2 more for the legs. 3 pins are similar, but remove the 2 legs. You can actually convert a 5-pin to a 3-pin by clipping off the legs. It's just a bit of arts and crafts. Otemu 3-pins are similar to a regular 3-pin, but have smaller holes for the leaves. Most cherry-style switches will not fit in these sockets, and the only way to convert them is to file down the leaves themselves. This becomes very time-consuming if you're on a budget, as the cheaper boards all use Otemu sockets. The beauty with optical keyboards is that even on the budget ones I've seen, they all use the same type of socket. However, the problem here is that it seems like only Gateron makes swappable optical switches, and the best switches out there still use traditional pins. There are 4 main components that make up the characteristics of a mechanical switch: the stem, the leaf, and the top and bottom housing. The bottom housing is pretty much stuck here as we need the opening for the pole to pass through. The top housing is going to be a 50-50 chance depending on the switch we use, since Kailh switches have a different latch system to the cherry style ones. Optical switches also introduce an additional latch that won't work on regular switches, and I actually had to re-record everything since I originally thought that the top housings weren't swappable. So please subscribe if you appreciate the effort. Editor's note: when I was replacing the stems on the actual keyboard, I found out that the switches it came with didn't have this extra latch, so I guess there's no way of knowing which type you'll get until they actually show up. The leaves could potentially be replaced, but you'd have to trim off the bottom prongs, and I didn't want to do anything destructive to the switch. Also, as I found out, messing with the leaves is a bit risky as they are quite fragile. One false move and you're left with a linear switch. And finally, the main focus for today, the stem. Most stems should work, as the only requirement is for the pole to be long enough to interrupt the beam of light, and even the regular Gateron Browns with one of the shortest stems out there still works. Our goal for today will be to determine if you gain any improvements by stem swapping Gateron Browns, and how much of the original switch you lose by giving up other components. For today's test, we have a bunch of familiar faces from our previous video. We have regular Gateron Browns, Cherry Clears, Tecsee Pandas, Feker Pandas, Kailh Polia, and the Boba U4T. We also would have had the Aqua Ocean Blues, but they didn't fit for some reason. I think it's because their rails are designed slightly differently than other stems, which is really weird as even the Boba U4s fit, and they have extra padding on the rails. For sound test, we'll start with the stock switch first, then swap out the bottoms and keep the stock spring, then the swap bottoms to 45 gram spring, then swap the entire housing and go back to the stock spring, then the new housing with the 45 gram spring, and finally the new housing with the 35 gram spring for the people like me who likes light switches. If all of that's a bit confusing, don't worry, timestamps will be in the description, so feel free to jump back and forth. Now, put on your headphones and let's get into it. As you probably heard, you get pretty close to the original Switch by keeping the top housing. With the full optical housing, you are definitely losing some of the unique resonance of each switch, but the flockiness of the longer poles are still apparent when compared to the regular Gateron browns. In terms of feel, to be honest, most of the switches felt pretty close to each other. It's not to say there isn't any improvement though. They all seem to have lost their sharp bumps, but they're definitely still larger than the Gaterons. Unfortunately, there's only so much you can do with the Gateron Leaf. Apart from the cherry clearance being noticeably scratchier than the rest, the Tecsee Panda, Feker Panda, and Kailh Polia all felt relatively similar to me. I mentioned in my previous video that their stems are supposed to be Halo True clones, so it makes sense that they're also similar. The Boba U4Ts are probably my favorites when they're using the 35-gram spring, as they are the easiest to press. However, I can't really recommend them as they are quite an expensive switch, and it feels like a waste using them just to swap with Gateron browns. I'd personally go with either of the previous three, whichever one you can find for the cheapest. The option of keeping the top housing feels a bit wasteful, but it's still a viable choice if you only have an optical keyboard and want to try new switches. One possibility you can consider if you have both a regular and optical keyboard and decide not to keep the top housing could be to get one set of Halo True clones and one set of Boba U4Ts. Then use the Halo Trues and the Bobas to make Holy Bobas, and the leftover Boba stems to make optical switches. Whatever you end up going with, hopefully you found this helpful in making your optical switches a bit more fun. Maybe eventually companies other than Gateron will start making optical switches, so you won't have to resort to tactics like these. But that's all for this one. I don't have too many more keyboard videos planned, but I'm thinking about diving into linear switches in the future. So consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.